When one person mysteriously vanishes, it's startling and unnerving. You may think, well, maybe if they hadn't been alone, they may have stood a chance. Or, if someone could have seen or heard them, they could have gone for help. But what happens when 5 people go missing, all at the same time? And not just missing, but under bizarre circumstances. How could 5 people come up against something and nobody made it out? How did nobody see 5 people in dire need of help? How did 5 people not make a noise? The bigger mystery, what was it? And is it still out there? Maybe there isn't always safety in numbers. This is the case of the Yuba County Five.
Hello everybody and welcome to True Crime Banter, the podcast aimed at bringing you your dose of murder relaxation. So just sit back and enjoy. Sing with it this time?
No, I was going to ask if you just amped it up there at the end.
I could have, but I didn't.
It's probably just the congestion.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the True Crime Banter podcast.
Yep.
We've got no banter for today, because today's a bit of a longer one.
Hey, but the haters are going to love that.
Oh, shit. We just got true crime. Fuck the banter. Fuck
it's
the banter.
Okay. Yeah, the people that don't like it,
They're
be
gonna be
pleased
so happy
this
about
time.
It. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, today you're just going to hop into the case of the
Yuba County Five.
And here we go.
Bill Sterling, Jackie Hewitt, Ted Weir, Jack Madruga, and Gary Mathias were all huge basketball fans. Not only would you find them in the stands, but these young men actually all played as well, for the same team called the Gateway Gators. The Gateway Gators was a basketball team for players with varying degrees of mental disabilities, and this is how they all met and became friends. Their ages ranged from 24 to 32, and all 5 men lived with their parents in and around Yuba County, California. It's late February 1978, and all the guys are buzzing with excitement, because the very next day, they were all going to play in their very first basketball tournament, sponsored by the Special Olympics. There was even a chance they could win a trip to Los Angeles as the prize, and it's all they were talking about.
Ooh.
Being the big fans that they were, they had heard that there was a college game that very night, about a 50-mile drive away in the city of Chico. Their parents were a little hesitant, wanting to make sure that they were all home to get some rest before their big game the next day. But they were also excited. The parents eventually agreed. And just a little side note here, the level of mental disability in these young men wasn't so extreme that they couldn't be unattended for periods of time.
Okay.
Some of the men had licenses and some held jobs as well.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Right.
But I just wanted to make sure, because I said that they all lived at home and some of them were in their 20s and early 30s, and so they weren't completely reliant on the parents at all times.
Nice.
That evening, they all loaded into Jack Madruga's turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego and headed off. Jack didn't mind driving. He was obsessed with his car, and any chance he could, he would take it out. A little while later, the men arrived at the game, had a good time, and afterwards stopped off to restock on snacks and drinks shortly before 10 p.m. What happens next We may never know. All the boys' parents woke up early the next morning to find their beds empty. Thinking maybe their own individual sons had slipped up and forgot to mention some kind of sleepover arrangement, they called the other parents. But panic set in when all the parents realized none of their sons had arrived home the night prior. They all immediately headed to the police station. This was totally out of character for any of them. They were all very responsible. Plus, all they had been talking about was this basketball tournament. There was no way they would have missed it.
Right.
Right away, police started searching the long stretch of highway that the boys would have traveled that night, but there was no sign of them or their vehicle. News of the missing men traveled fast, and further up north, a ranger for the Plumas National Forest was reading the report when his eyes fixated on the vehicle description. He had seen a car just like it a couple days ago, parked on a road not too far away. It didn't alarm him before because the road that it was on was often used as an overnight parking area for people who went off into the mountains to cross-country ski.
Okay, makes sense.
Police headed out and found the car exactly where the ranger had said, and it was quickly confirmed to be Madruga's. Unfortunately, there was no sign of the men in or near the car. The weirdest part, though, is that the national forest where the car was found was over 70 miles in the opposite direction of where the men lived. When the parents were informed of this, none of them knew why their sons would have gone there. It held no significance to their knowledge. When the car was found, the snow had almost entirely taken it over. It had been snowing for days at this point. The officers noticed that the car was actually stuck in a snowbank, and there were signs that the men had tried to get the car free. All the men were in good physical health, and the snowbank wasn't very high. They could have easily gotten it free between the 5 of them. Police thought maybe it was a mechanical issue, but when the car was hot-wired, it started with no problem. And when checking the gas tank, there was a quarter tank left. So where did they go, and why did they leave the vehicle?
Yeah.
When police were driving down this dirt road to find the car, it was full of holes and extremely bumpy and hard to navigate. But when looking at the Montego, the underside showed no signs of scratches or dents. They figured the driver either had been down this road before and were aware of the conditions, or someone must have been extremely careful and slow. I noted in here that I'm not sure if I find any significance in this, but police seemed to point this out any chance they could in all the articles.
Yeah, I don't think anything too weird of it either, especially someone that's really proud of their car and wants to drive it at any opportunity.
Right.
You're going to want to take care of it. You're not going to fly down a road full of potholes.
Yeah, and I also think, too, even if you hadn't been there before, if you started down a road and it started feeling weird, you would immediately start going slow.
Yeah.
And you would keep a slow pace.
And also,
anybody would have done that.
This is a 9-year-old car at this point. What do you mean that we didn't see any sign of damage from the road? Like, I bet you there is damage.
Right?
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
With the snow showing no signs of stopping, searchers tried their best in the stormy conditions. While teams were out on foot, back at headquarters, they put out a request for anyone with information to call them. They wanted to know if any of their friends got a call from one of them, or perhaps a kind stranger offered them a ride that night if they had gotten stranded. They wanted anything. Unfortunately, no substantial leads ever came in. And eventually, due to the conditions, they had to call off the search and wait for better weather. All their family and friends could do was wait, and hope that they were held up somewhere warm, waiting for the storm to pass. It isn't until June, when some bikers out for a day ride stumble upon a Forest Service trailer about 20 miles from where the car was found. Whether they were seeking shelter from the heat or just out of curiosity, they ventured inside, only to be hit with the worst smell you can imagine.
And this was 20 miles away from where the car was found.
Mm-hmm.
And 7 months later, in the middle of summer. I could imagine the
Well,
smell.
February to June? Is that 7?
They disappeared in November.
No, February.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
I'm
okay.
sorry. Why did I think November?
You're fine.
All right.
You're good.
So, well, still 4 months?
I mean, maybe it's because I mentioned snow. You might think
maybe I
winter,
was
but
thinking winter.
it's February.
Okay.
You can still snow there.
Still.
Yeah.
4 months, not 7.
And it is out in the mountains, so.
Yeah.
I mean, still. And it's basically late February, so it's basically March. March, April, June. I mean, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. As their eyes adjusted, they couldn't believe what they were looking at. There on the bed, wrapped in layers and layers of blankets, was the decomposing body of Ted Weir. His feet were completely frostbitten, and he had lost about 100 pounds. Based off of the length of his facial hair, it's estimated he could have been in the cabin alive for up to 13 weeks since his last shave. The cause of death showed to be a combination of hypothermia and starvation. And this is where it gets really weird. The cabin where he was found was very well equipped. It was meant to be a bunker, essentially, a place to seek shelter and wait for help. It had plenty of matches and kindling, and even a butane tank for heat, along with extra winter clothing. So why did Ted have frostbite and show signs of hypothermia? He had all the tools he needed to keep warm. Additionally, around his body were cans and cans of food that had been emptied and eaten, so he clearly had been eating over a period of time. Yet, when police checked the cupboards, there was enough dry food to last him and the 4 other men an entire year. So how had he starved to death as well? Ted Weir's family said that his disability may have played a part in why he had not survived even with abundant supplies. They said that he lacked common sense, even referring to an incident where their ceiling had caught on fire and he just laid in bed while it happened, forcing his family to drag him out.
Jesus.
While there was no sign of the other 4 men, there was evidence that Ted was not alone in the cabin, at least not the whole time. Shoes belonging to Gary Mathias were found along with food cans that had been eaten and opened with a military P-38 can opener, which only Jack Madruga and Gary Mathias knew how to use due to their brief military backgrounds. And I looked up what this was, a P-38. I'm like, this sounds...
Can opener.
Yes, and it's just like... It's just a little piece of metal. It's like 1 inch by a ½ inch. And it has like a little thing that flips out that looks like a little triangle.
Yeah, I feel like I can... I think we had one growing up.
They're so small.
Maybe
I mean, they're
not
meant
small,
to be like
compact.
Similar. Yeah. And
to where you can almost puncture it and like pour it out without... Well...
Yeah, no, basically, I mean, yeah, it's very small and it's meant to be like easily carried around and stuff because you have to pack all this shit in the military, yeah. And I actually watched a YouTube video of a guy like
showing you how to use it.
how to use it, and I guess it's got its name from like it takes 38 turns to open a can or something with it. P-38, I don't know. Oh. Apparently it's been around since World War II. A little history fact for you people.
Ooh, little FF right there.
Yeah. After finding Ted, police began to work backwards. Starting at the cabin and hoping to find something valuable along the 20-mile trail back towards the car was found months ago. And eventually they did. Along this route, they found the scattered remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling. Evidence showed these young men died of hypothermia as well. They theorized that one of them had laid down to rest, which is a common symptom of hypothermia, and the other one had kept them company, sadly leading them both to pass from the cold. It was just 2 days later when Jackie Hewitt's remains were found too. This entire case is not only baffling but extremely sad, but this part is extra sad. Jackie Hewitt's father had been out searching on foot and came upon clothing he recognized as belonging to his son. When he picked up the clothing, an entire backbone fell out onto the ground.
Jesus.
This put the total count at 4 men found, just leaving Gary Mathias. To this day, his remains have never been found. As far as theories or sightings go, this is a strange one. If you look up this case, all of the sources you find will mention this one story over and over again, consistently, of a man who thinks he may have spotted these 5 men.
Oh, all of them.
Mm-hmm. That same night that they apparently would have been stranded up there. It's kind of long, so I'll just give you the summary. Basically, this little bit older guy, maybe 50s, was up in the mountains on that same area where the car was found, and his car had gotten stuck. He tried to get it out, his own car out, and suffered a heart attack while he was up there alone.
Wow.
So knowing that he was having a heart attack, he got into his car and he started the heat. Now remember, he's stuck, right? So he's basically just hoping somebody comes along and hoping he doesn't die. So he passes out from this insane thing he's going through, right? And he wakes up hours later at night, and he wakes up because he hears something. And when he gets up and kind of starts looking around, he sees car lights not too far away.
Okay.
So he gets out, he kind of pulls himself out of his car, still in and out of it, and just starts yelling for help, right? The voices stop, and they turn off their car lights. So he's just screaming for help, and people just turn off their car lights, right? So he then passes back out, and then wakes back up, and says that he now hears voices again. This is hours later again, by the way. And now he sees flashlights and people walking not too far away. He can see shadows, right?
Yeah.
He says that he sees 5 dudes and a woman with a baby. And he starts yelling for help again.
Okay.
And they all stop talking and turn off their flashlights and walk away. He then passes back out.
Okay.
I know, right? Wakes up hours and hours later in the morning now of the next day. Pulls himself together and starts walking back into town. And somebody eventually finds him and takes him to the hospital. And the doctor confirmed, yeah, you suffered a heart attack. They also confirmed, the doctor, that these could have been completely made up hallucinations. Or how do you say? Hallucinations. Thank you.
That's what I was going to ask. Is that a symptom of, heart attack survivors?
Yeah.
Especially when you go
into
cardiac arrest alone.
Even he said it could have been real. I don't know. Yeah.
That, what? Okay.
But I wanted to bring it up because it's brought up everywhere. So I was well, I guess it's important enough to bring up.
Yeah, there's probably not too many, it sounds like, sightings of these people. So anybody that thinks they might have.
Right.
If this is the only guy.
Exactly.
Then, yeah, you
And what are the chances if you really think that you saw 5 dudes up there? When you're up on a very isolated area where nobody is really.
There's a story of 5 people missing.
Right.
And so he must have been on that same road then that they were on. Okay.
Some of the boys' parents agreed that the sighting was probably false, stating that their boys were taught to help those in need, and if someone had been repeatedly calling for help, any of them would have come to his rescue.
Yeah, you would think at least the people that had been in the army.
Yeah, right.
I think maybe, well, I'm going to let you, we'll discuss it at the end, but I'll let you finish.
A woman who owned a gas station in a nearby town told police that a day or two after the boys went missing, she saw 4 out of the 5 men at her store. 2 were inside buying food, and 2 were outside using the payphone. Police weren't sure about this theory, though, because why would the men have come all the way back in town from way up high in the mountain to this little store to then go all the way back up into the mountains and then flee into the woods and pass away? It just didn't make sense. Also, too, a little side note is that when the parents were told about this potential gas station sighting and that 2 of the boys were in a payphone, making calls, they quickly discounted this just strictly based off of the fact that they were making phone calls, because apparently all of them had a really bad phobia of talking on the phone, and none of them would have done this.
Gotcha.
It would have been paralyzing to them.
Well,
that's what the parents say, at least. Who knows if they really were desperate to get out of that situation, if they were like calling for help
lost
somewhere,
or
they didn't know who to
something,
call.
yeah.
I don't know. But with not much weight to this theory, though, police noted it but moved on. And that's where the case has stayed. Jack Madruga's mother had her own theory, stating, quote, "There was some force that made them go up there. They wouldn't have just fled off into the woods like a bunch of quail. We know good and well that somebody made them do it." End quote. Another family member speaking out was Ted Weir's sister-in-law, stating, quote, "They seen something at that game, at the parking lot. They may have seen it and didn't even realize that they seen it." End quote. Matthias' stepdad seems to think that nobody used the supplies to make a fire in the cabin in fear that they may have been found by someone they were potentially hiding from, and it would have brought attention to them.
Okay.
Someone brought up also that one of the guys had a friend who lived in a town not too far from the National Forest. But when located, that friend said that he hadn't heard from any of the guys, let alone that one friend, in over a year. Thoughts and theories are sadly all anyone has after all of this time. Sometimes when a story has so many odd facts, we tend to think big, that the answer has to be something crazy and twisted. What if they had just simply taken a wrong turn? It was pretty late and they had almost an hour drive back home. They could have mistook that dirt road for another turn and ended up too far down the path and got stuck. Or was there a fight? Is that why they all left the safety of the car? The snow was very bad, and perhaps they got turned around, not being able to see their tracks back to the car. Or maybe they did see something that night, and someone followed them. Perhaps in the bad weather or out of fear, they took a turn and got out to flee further on foot, and before they knew it, they were stuck with no way back. We're coming up on the 45th anniversary, and with nothing substantial, it's hard to believe we'll ever get answers. But it's not about us. 5 families have been left with nothing. They lost a child, lost hope, lost time and sleep. Nothing gained, but questions and heartache. So, yeah.
Okay.
There's a weird one for you.
Potentially
weird.
Do we know the severity of the disabilities between the 5 of them?
There was a mix of like schizophrenia, bipolar, things like that. Some had anxiety, depression. I know that 2 of the military men had been discharged because of schizophrenia.
Okay.
So they had like an honorable discharge.
And the oldest one was 42?
32.
32?
24 to 32. So
okay, 24.
Not even old at
42, all. Sorry.
Mm-mm.
Do we know who the oldest one was? Or
I think it was Matthias.
Gary Matthias.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only one they haven't
found. I can open it back up real quick.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I guess I
put all their ages in here.
What I find...
Oh, I'm sorry. Ted Weir, so the one that was found.
Okay, and what are the ages of the other?
So Jackie Hewitt was 24, the youngest.
Okay.
Next one up was Gary Matthias, 25. Bill Sterling, 29. Jack Madruga, 30. And Ted Weir, 32.
Okay, and Ted Weir was the one found in the cabin?
Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting because you mentioned it when you said they found Ted in the cabin, that it looked like he had a 12 or 13 weeks still alive based on his beard growth, which from February to June, you're talking almost
that whole
12
time.
to 16 weeks between them going missing and then them finding Ted. So you're talking that they might have found Ted right after he had passed away.
Right.
And then you're talking about a bunch of food being eaten and Matthias, right? Gary Matthias not being found, but signs of him also being at the cabin.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Obviously, the other two, it seemed like they maybe were either lagging behind or maybe they all got to the cabin and then the other two said, we're going to try to go back to the car or something. And that's where they ended up, perishing.
I mean, 20 miles is a really
long way. Yeah.
I'm amazed they even made it that far up.
I just wonder if, because you said Gary was also one of the only two that knew how to use the can opener.
Mm-hmm.
If he stayed at the cabin and they did all eat, Ted sadly died, but like Gary survived somehow and is still alive.
Right.
I mean,
that's what they sent out a picture of Gary Mathias to like everything, all the jails, hospitals, grocery stores, gas stations, everything around, and there was never a sighting.
Yeah.
There was a small little thing that was mentioned. These little facts are always kind of odd because when it's not mentioned throughout every article, I'm like, I don't even know. Did someone just hear that somewhere? Yeah. But it was mentioned that they found like kind of like a bundle of blankets kind of going in a direction away from the cabin that was different than the others. Yeah. Okay. And they said that they found it and they think it belonged to the cabin, but there was no remains found near it.
Yeah.
So if he had dropped it, which would be weird in the cold to just leave your blankets. But also, there's also the fact, too, that, like, sometimes it sounds super fucked up, but, like, sometimes animals take their food places. Like,
yeah, okay.
A bear took it into, like, a little den or something, and you just haven't found the bones because they're not out on the ground. Right, they're just somewhere else.
Yeah.
The odds of him being alive are obviously...
Oh, yeah, very slim.
Basically impossible.
I mean, 4 out of the 5 didn't survive, for sure. So we know the fact that the chances of him.
So the whole like mystery behind never finding him isn't that really a big of a mystery to me, at least.
No, I mean
they're somewhere.
Yeah, and we're also talking, late 70s, so it's not like they have the greatest technology to.
Right. I mean, I'm surprised they were even able to like DNA or like however they identified them.
Yeah.
Maybe the clothes they were wearing had tags on it or something. Yeah. I mean, back then, I don't even know how they did that.
Yeah, that's just it. I guess what the one point that is just sticking with me is that they were like so close to finding Ted, at least when he was still alive. Yeah. I mean, they found him less than 16 weeks later, and they said his beard growth was at least 13 weeks. So we're talking a 3-week period where he was alive, and they didn't find him.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, if that much food was being eaten. They said, in abundance, there was an abundance of food there, but you said there was open and eaten food, right? Around him?
All around him, yeah.
I mean, that could have very well been Gary. You know, and maybe Gary did, after Ted, died, I gotta go do something.
Right.
So,
and it's thought that Mathias took his shoes, Ted Weir's shoes.
Okay. Yeah,
because he was
Gary's
found with no shoes, exactly.
And Gary's shoes were still at the cabin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not implying that Gary did something.
No.
I'm just saying that like it's weird that he's the one person not found that, based on it, all the time and everything, probably in his experience, probably had the best chance of still being alive by the time they were found.
Right.
It sounds like he knew, being in the army, how to survive, I suppose. And they weren't that. I mean, yeah. That's a weird one. That is. There's always weird. There's a few cases like this where, when things take place in mountains like that, you just never know. Mm-hmm. Especially when there's missing bodies still.
Yeah.
Like the first podcast we did together, the missing Panama hikers. Where it's just like there's so many options that it could have been, that you might never know, just because of how vast the forest is.
And I feel the same way about that one, the Panama hikers, as I do about this, where it seems crazier than it probably is. Yeah. It really is probably just like Panama hikers, the elements.
Yep. And when you throw in disabilities, I equate it. You and I we talked a lot, and I'm sure people who listen to our podcast and other true crime about the Idaho murders.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And we've had long conversations about it. And a point in that case right now is that the roommate didn't call 911 right away.
Yeah.
The thing is, and I brought this up to you, is that you don't really know, though, how you would act in that situation until you're in it. You know what you think you would do, but until you're actually in a situation, you don't know. And so you don't know how these 5 people, whether it's Ted, Gary, any of them, when you get to a cabin, I mean, especially when you're 20 miles away in the winter, you just don't know where your brain is at to where I know exactly what to do to survive. You might just be, I need food, and you're so hungry, and then you don't realize, oh, I'm freezing to death.
Yeah.
And then you're dead. Like, you just don't know.
And it could have easily just also, like, simply been, they could have all been at the cabin at one point.
That's what I'm thinking.
Maybe something happened to Ted. Maybe he did get frostbite. He was the first one, and they were like, hey, you just stay here. You get warm. You eat. We're going to go out and try to get back to the car, go get help. And then they just passed away. Exactly, yeah. And the only reason he survived that long is because he stayed behind because he got hurt or whatever first or whatever it was.
Yeah, he was frostbitten, stuck in the cabin, couldn't leave.
Yeah.
So they all, I mean, that probably sounds most reasonable, that they all got there.
Yeah.
He was in pain, obviously. They said, we're going to go get you help. We all got food in ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's walk back to the car now.
Or the other 2 never made it to the cabin. The 2 that passed away together.
Behind. That's what I was kind of talking about earlier. But the idea that they all got there, ate the food, instead of being like, let's get warm or anything, it's like, hey, we're fueled up. Let's get back to the car now and try to get you help.
Yeah.
But again, who knows? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard this one.
Do you know
the name sounds familiar, but I don't think I've heard it.
There's going to be a lot of people listening that will know what I'm talking about, but it's the Dilatov Pass? Russia, I think. Is it Russia?
Where is it?
Siberia?
It might be. It's
something like that, right? Where there's a lot of like people out there that are like, oh, it's a Yeti or whatever, right? I don't know. This has been called like the American Dilatov Pass kind of thing. Where
there's a lot of weird things happen in that area.
And I can't quote it for sure, but it's basically just a bunch of hikers that went on this crazy, like, Mount Everest, basically, kind of trek.
Yeah.
And they went up there eventually to find them because they never came back down, and they were all dead in the weirdest fucking way.
Yeah.
And I think some of them have, like, their eyeballs removed or something. Like, it's insane. But this was so long ago. Who knows if someone just made that up? I mean,
you're
don't know.
talking about the Dilatov.
Yes. So they call it that. Sometimes you'll see it, the American Dilatov Pass. This one.
The Yuba.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's weird and people died in a mountain. Yeah.
Lots of questions, no answers, and weird things to ask. Interesting.
Yeah. But I'd like to hear what other people have to say about
any
this.
theories? Because there's a lot.
Funky.
I feel like there's a lot to go off of, even though there's not a lot of information about
you could really take this so far. Or you could be like me and be like, it's probably not that complicated.
It might just be the elements.
Yeah. It's just...
Well, I vow, as
we vow,
segue on a segue into the ending of this episode, that you will not be covering the next episode. It has been so long since I did an episode myself.
I know.
I mean, we've got our own reasons why, aka we're both very busy. But
but my schedule's
this than me.
A little bit more flexible. Yeah, I can squeeze in these little cases.
Oh, but I'll squeeze one in. Okay. I'm gonna squeeze one in. I'll
a little quickie for you.
I don't know.
Pinch it off.
Weird. Yeah. Anyways, thank you for that. I would love to know what everybody else might think happens. Yeah. Well, thank you all. I hope you all enjoyed listening, and if you did, be sure to leave a review, a rating.
I think probably on the next one, right? We'll try to get some comments out there, reviews, stuff like that. So just load us up, and we'll shoot it out the next time.
We are doing a lot of weird things on the next podcast, but I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I guess that's it.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
All right, adios.
Bye.